Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode. Today we are going to be talking about pathological altruism and the White Knight Syndrome. And to do this we are going to be taking another live drive through the California highway in the new Mitsubishi Lancer. Hello everyone and welcome to today's live drive. Today we're back out on the California highway in the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo FQ360. So I brought a friend out today and we're going to take a little lap around this track while we discuss pathological altruism. Now this is going to be based on the book The White Knight Syndrome by Marilyn Krieger. And we're going to talk about what the difference is between someone who rescues in a balanced way versus someone who rescues in a pathological way. Now, I wanted to bring another opponent out on the track today just to give myself a little bit more of an incentive to push it through some of these bends. It's going to be a lot of twisting, turning roads on today's episode, but I thought the setting would be nice, a nice little morning drive out here on the simulated California highway. So, first and foremost, what is it that's going to cause these people to behave this way? Well, it's probably good to go back to the beginning. The life history of the White Knight is going to be checkered with symptoms of drug abuse in the family. You're going to have a lot of emotional abandonment, abuse of the physical, psychological, and even sexual nature. And these guys tend to have fear of abandonment from a lot of their early caregivers. There could be a perceived threat of loss or a loss in and of itself, and this is going to result in a few different kinds of White Knights. Now, Marilyn Krieger outlines 4 different kinds of rescuers and includes a balanced rescuer as the 4th type, just as a control, because a lot of these categories are not discrete, they do overlap, and different people can show symptoms of the different types, which we'll get into in just a moment. So what kind of behaviors are you likely to see carry forward into the adult life of the White Knight? Well, first, there's going to be a pattern of relationships, which tend to be started with people that may be a little bit on the needy side. Maybe they have a history of drug abuse or other kinds of abuse themselves, and this gives the White Knight plenty to fix. Now, it's this fixing behavior that is really the crux of this issue. If they were to rescue it in, I guess, a more helpful way that's based on the needs of the person being helped, then we probably wouldn't be having this discussion because there wouldn't really be a whole lot to talk about. But what we're talking about here, pardon me, is the White Knights, that are choosing to rescue based more on their own unmet needs rather than the needs of the person they're supposedly helping. Now, this helping behavior can be used as a form of control, and seeing as it's tied directly into their sense of validation, this is a behavior that's going to perpetuate itself over and over. So let's get into a little bit of a discussion regarding the different types of the White Knight. The first one described by the author is the overly emotional White Knight. Now, this person is going to have the history the most largely made up of those emotional abandonment issues, and this fear of abandonment is really what drives the overly emotional or empathic White Knight to solve the problems of other people in a way that's not really helping them. Now, this may take the form of, you don't think their schedule's planned properly, so you do it for them, or, that you don't think that they're going to make their lunch properly, so you do it all for them again. And again, when these behaviors are performed, it does relieve a lot of the anxiety of the White Knight. And that's why, again, a lot of these behaviors are going to be repeated, because that sense of relief when they're performed is something that, well, I guess they become used to and crave. The next type of White Knight that we're talking about is going to be the tarnished White Knight. Now, the history of failed relationships with this individual is going to lead them to, well, really over-idealize their partner. They're going to put this person up on a pedestal and see them as someone they aren't really. And any threats or devaluations of that image are often met with a rather stern rebuke. Oof. Into the the side. How much time do I got? Alright, I got 8 seconds on the guy behind me, and just like it's good to maintain a safe distance from your opponent in the race, the emotional White Knight and the tarnished White Knight both really fear emotional distance, and as such they engage in these pathological helping behaviors as a way of sort of maintaining that relationship, or maintaining that sense of control, really. Now, the final kind of White Knight is going to be your terrifying or terrified White Knight. Now, these individuals are often the ones with the worst relationship history, and as such have learned not to trust relationships. But if they're able to find an individual who's maybe in a worse situation than them, they're able to help them as a way of perhaps ignoring a lot of the emotions that they deal with on a daily basis. Now, as we get out here onto the old simulated Golden Gate Bridge, we're really going to open up the taps and see what this 360 horsepower can get us up to here. Opponent is a nice comfortable 10 seconds behind, and hopefully I can finish this race without smashing up this car too badly. So let's see how well that active yaw control can keep me straight through the corners. I find the active yaw control in these Mitsubishi Lancers, simulated or not, to be kind of distracting. It's almost like a exchange of oversteer for understeer, and the computer just sort of decides when that's going to be. So again, I have kind of gotten used to a lot of the rear-wheel drive cars in this game and the kind of drifting associated with that. But fortunately we managed to thread the needle without destroying this car at all. Excellent. So we can continue to discuss what a balanced rescuer might look like. Ugh. Well, that could have rescued me from that crappy brake job. The balanced rescuer is going to be someone who responds directly to the needs of the person that they're helping. They're not in it for themselves, so to speak. The balanced rescuer is going to be, I guess, more comfortable with their own emotions, and as such they're going to be in a better position to deal with the emotions of others. Because as we discussed in the last video, the way that people are going to react when given any sort of external stimulus, that was a sweet jump, is going to be that initial filtering through the lens of your own existing bias, followed by an emotional reaction to that bias. From there, it's going to lead to those behaviors that we talked about before, and then the consequences of those behaviors feeding right back into the initial maladaptive belief. So, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you guys know any White Knights in your life? Or have you maybe engaged in some of these behaviors yourself? I know for me, I've definitely tried or felt the need and even engaged in the behavior of the overly emotional White Knight, where I've almost felt responsible for the feelings of other people. And unfortunately, it put me in a position where I wasn't really as able to help them as I might have otherwise been if I had just been responsible for the way I was feeling instead. So, we're going to try to make it through these last few bends of the California highway. Lots of blind turns. So I know this is kind of an unusual format for discussing such psychological topics, but I thought it might be something a little bit different rather than just sitting in front of the camera. And besides, I do want to get a little bit more practice with the live streaming, and I thought what better way to challenge myself to do so than by throwing myself into this very challenging simulator and trying to do two things at once. So I definitely appreciate you guys taking the time to tune into this particular live drive on the White Knight Syndrome and Pathological Altruism. I'll leave a link in the description below if you'd like to take a look at a preview of this book on Google Play. So again, thanks again for tuning into this particular episode of The Shredding Skeptic, and we'll see you next time.